Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality, coming back with you today with something different. I know a lot of the videos lately have been all related to the Charlie Kirk situation or just downer sort of political stuff. So let's switch gears and go into something that I just like reading about, which is history. And I came across this, I don't even remember where, but it's from Mexico News Daily, dated September 12th. And it's kind of goes back to a little bit of Roman history, which I thoroughly enjoy. It says, was the fall of Constantinople responsible for modern Mexico? And I saw that and I was like, how? But I was like, I'd be interested to find out. So let's do this together. So it's a question that challenges how we've traditionally understood one of history's most significant encounters. The conventional narrative of 1521 focuses on conquest, colonization, and cultural destruction, a perspective that has shaped Mexican national identity for centuries. But one controversial historian is now asking whether this framework, while historically accurate in many respects, might be incomplete. I had a random hiccup there, sorry. To understand it, we must first relocate ourselves to the east. It's 1453. Constantinople, one of the world's most fabulously wealthy cities, has been reduced to rubble. And it's funny because they had 1453 there. My brain went to 476. That was the fall of Rome. Whoops, wrong town. So back to 1453. It says, Sultan Mehmed II waits until dawn on May 29th to unleash his 80,000 troops against what's left of Constantine XI's defenses, who emerged for one last desperate attempt to save the glittering Byzantine capital. Hint, they did not. It says, as churches burn and Ottoman flags are raised over the Hagia Sophia, now claimed for Islam, an undetectable but destructive temple, that doesn't say temple, it says ripple, cascades westward. And it's as if a hairline fissure appears beneath Tenochtitlan, the America's greatest or grandest stronghold, which by 1521 would be gone. The world would be irrevocably changed forever. That's actually a cool picture. I don't want to just skip past it. It says, was the fall of Tenochtitlan triggered by the Turks? It says, perhaps, argues one historian. Okay, now I'm interested to see how that would happen. So it says, from Ottoman control to Spanish exploration. Constantinople's strategic importance in international trade cannot be overstated. For centuries, the Byzantine capital controlled the Bosphorus Strait, one of the major trade routes connecting east and west. The strait connected with the legendary Silk Road, opening European gates to goods, notably spices and teas, from China, India, and Central Asia. The city's geography made it Europe's most important commercial center for a majority of the medieval era. As the Ottoman Empire's rise was aggressive and brought devastating tariffs to these land routes connecting the two continents, does sound familiar, severely affecting the lucrative spice trade. It made sense for European nations to seek alternative transportation routes as economies were crumbling, especially in critical Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa. Spain, too, was feeling the blow, and the country's response was rooted in centuries of maritime tradition. Spanish seafaring traced back to ancient times, when the Iberian Peninsula was home to coastal peoples like the Phoenicians, Greeks, and Carthaginians. Spain's geographic advantage was stark. Its extensive coastlines on both the Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea were perfectly positioned for oceanic exploration. By the 15th century, Spain had already started investing heavily in finding new trading sea routes, and Christopher Columbus's 1492 expedition alone has been reported to have cost almost $530,000 in today's currency. And that doesn't sound like a lot given money now, but back then that was probably a real lot. It says, the Age of Discovery, a global transformation. It says, Columbus famously miscalculated his route to Asia, believing India was about 4,000 kilometers west of Spain, less than a quarter of the actual distance. Yeah, that's a hell of a miscalculation there, sir. It says, this geographical error, combined with Spain's access to Atlantic trade winds, led him to a place unknown to any European at the time, launching what we now call the Age of Discovery. The Age of Discovery would last until 1600 and encompass far more than the uncovering of the Americas. In 1488, Bartolomeu Diaz proved Africa could be circumnavigated when he rounded the Cape of Good Hope. And actually, I was about to say, isn't that someone else? And then I see the name coming up who I thought it was, and it says a decade later, Vasco da Gama, who I thought did that, had reached India using this very route, establishing a new wave, pun intended, of direct European-Asian sea trade. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean, proving to the world that the Americas were separate continents. The Magellan-Elcano expedition of 1519 to 1522 completed the first global circumnavigation, and Magellan died on that, if I remember. He died way before it ended, and his crew finished the expedition without him. It says, as these expeditions proved the world was bigger than previously thought, Spanish attention shifted from seeking a passage to Asia toward exploring and establishing settlements in newly accessible lands. These global shifts would famously lead Spanish conquistadors to the heart of the Mexica Empire, where Hernan Cortés and his indigenous allies would defy all odds and lay siege to the Golden Capital. The defeat marked not only the end of the Mexica Empire, but the birth of a new colonial society dominated by Spain, writes historian Stuart B. Schwartz. In the span of 30 years, Western understanding of world geography would be fundamentally transformed, a shift that would change the way humans understood both the world and each other. Next section is challenging the traditional narrative. It says Mexican historian Juan Miguel, and that's a hell of a last name, Zunzunegui, is among those offering a different and somewhat controversial perspective. Instead of framing the Spanish encounter as purely violent subjugation, Zunzunegui, I'm going to have a hard time with that every time it comes up, says he proposes it was an inevitable encounter between two worlds that created a new civilization. Not Mexica, not Spanish, but mestizo. Says the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves become our reality, observes Zunzunegui, who, in addition to being a historian, is also a writer, philosopher, and lecturer, known for his critical and revisionist approach to Mexican history. Born in Mexico City in 1975, he's only a few years older than me. Zunzunegui has authored over 20 books, including The Myths That Gave Us Trauma, challenging conventional narratives about Mexico's origins. Through a historical narrative, you construct the reality in which you live, he explains. How philosophical of him. Says academic support for this cultural synthesis theory comes from Colin McLaughlin of Tulane University. In Imperialism and the Origins of Mexican Culture, McLaughlin argues that modern mestizo culture evolved over the centuries as a synthesis of old and new world civilizations. Both Spain and Mesoamerica were on similar historical trajectories when they collided. This idea that everything was perfect here before the Spanish arrived, it's not only false, it's very dangerous, Zunzunegui argues. For many historians, including Zunzunegui, it comes down to facts. Mexico is the result of the mix between indigenous and Spanish cultures. Mexico did not exist before 1521, and what did exist at that time was by no means a perfect society. The Mexica, as powerful as they were at their peak, survived only approximately 200 years and conquered numerous other indigenous civilizations through warfare. That's the story of humanity. It says the boundaries of present-day Mexico were scattered among peoples connected primarily through war and trade, not a unified paradise. Next section says the psychology of defeat narratives. It says if the blame for all our decline lies in an event from 500 years ago, we've just handed our power to whoever tells that version of history that we believe, Zunzunegui suggests. He makes an interesting comparison. Are Turks constantly retelling stories of Constantinople's destruction, a civilization that far surpassed Tenochtitlan in both power and age? In fact, they do not. They move forward and adapt, and allow this cycle of conquest and rebirth to serve as a stepping stone in the impactful journey that has made Turkey the historical powerhouse that it is today. It's a historical powerhouse, yes. I was going to say they're not a powerhouse today, but yes, they were definitely a historical powerhouse. As in Mexico, we make heroes of everyone who is violent, who leads revolutions, but most importantly, everyone who fights very hard and loses. We don't make heroes of those who win. Mexico's tendency to glorify the loser, and I can't pronounce that first one there, I'm going to butcher that, Cuauhtémoc, I got that wrong, I'm sorry, Hidalgo y Castilla, Zapata, profoundly affects the national mentality, encouraging a sense of victimhood. If all peoples create historical myths to unite themselves, why do we in Mexico tell ourselves a myth of defeat, of humiliation? You can't expect to tell all the children in Mexico that we were humiliated, we were looted, we were conquered, but go ahead and move the country forward. Yeah, I can understand why he would think that. So this is reframing Mexico's foundation story. So why isn't the rise of Mexico the rise of Mexico as opposed to the fall of Tenochtitlan? This reframing isn't just semantic, it's transformative. Instead of viewing 1521 as an ending, could it instead be seen as a beginning? After all, it would be the birth of something unprecedented in human history. The meeting of East and West, that awkward interaction between Montezuma and Cortés, is perhaps the most extraordinary moment that mankind has ever experienced. I don't know why, I just had like a flash of if you've ever seen Apocalypto, I don't know if it's based on an actual true story, but if you know the ending of Apocalypto, and I'm not going to say what it is, it's not like it's a twist ending or anything, but it's kind of like that's where we are at that point in history sort of thing. It kind of reminded me of that, and I'll leave it there. I don't want to ruin the movie for you if you're interested in seeing it. Just keep in mind, even though it's an American-made movie, Mel Gibson directed it, and I think he might have written it too. It's entirely told in a different language, so it's going to be subtitled for you, at least from what I remember, unless I'm thinking of some other movie. But again, highly recommended movie. Go watch it. So it says, the irony is striking. Constantinople's fall, intended to consolidate Ottoman power in the east, might have inadvertently triggered the creation of a new civilization thousands of miles away. The economic pressures that forced Spain into the Atlantic were one factor that set in motion a chain of events that would birth modern Mexico, a synthesis that neither Mehmed II or Constantine XI could have imagined. Well, Constantine was dead. He was killed at that Constantinople battle in 1453. It says, we are children of gods on both sides of the ocean, Zunzanegi reflects. Europe crossed the Atlantic to meet here with the best of America. That, for me, is the synthesis of Mexico's... Why did I say America? I don't even see the word there. So it says, I'll repeat that. That, for Zunzanegi, is the synthesis of Mexico's history. I think that's a good way to look at it. I kind of agree with him based on the small stuff that I'm reading here. It says, thanks to Constantinople's fall, global forces went into action and converged to create something entirely new. This reframing offers not just historical accuracy, but national empowerment. In a world where every nation tells empowering stories about its origins, Mexico's story of synthesis and transformation could be told as the remarkable achievement it may have been. Yeah, I like that. Why don't you use that as Mexico's foundation story? That's actually a pretty good story. I like that a lot, actually. I think I need to go read into this a bit more. I might have to look into this dude's books. And my guy, what are you wearing here? Anyway, yeah, I might have to look into that guy's stuff, because that's a very interesting thing. I'd like to read more about the philosophy behind this, or not the philosophy, but like just more about it, I guess. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.